Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking the stack of sources you gave us and really moving beyond just the statistics of homelessness.
Yeah.
Our mission is to dig into the complexity, the real causes, and maybe most importantly, what the data says about effective solutions, all based on the material you wanted us to look at.
It's a huge topic.
Yeah.
And the sources are, well, they're really comprehensive. They go from global UN definitions all the way to very specific policy evaluations in the U.S.
So we need to get grounded fast, and the place to start has to be the sheer scale of this because it is just staggering.
It really is.
The sources are projecting that in 2025, something like 330 million people around the world will be experiencing what's called absolute homelessness.
Right, which means no physical shelter at all, nothing. And that number, 330 million, it just shows why we have to be so precise with our language.
Okay, so let's define the terms.
The UN and European statisticians use a couple of key categories. The first is primary homelessness. That's the most visible kind, people living on the streets.
But that's not the whole picture, is it? Most people fall into that second category, secondary homelessness.
Exactly. That's way more widespread. It's about instability. It's moving between temporary places, shelters, a friend's couch, a relative's spare room. It's constant motion.
And the language itself is changing, too. The sources point to this big shift. Why are we hearing terms like unhoused or houseless more now?
It's really about dignity and accuracy. I mean, the AP-style book, for example, pushes for person-first language. So saying people experiencing homelessness instead of just the homeless.
Because the homeless sounds like a permanent identity.
It does. It strips away individuality. It's not an identity. It's an experience. It's not a choice. And it's definitely better than some of the historical terms like vagrants or tramps.
That's a crucial distinction. An experience, not a lifestyle. So, okay, let's pivot to the realities on the ground. We have to start with this fact versus fiction section from the U.S. data because it just dismantles so many myths.
Yeah.
First up, this idea, this really deeply ingrained idea that people who are homeless just need to get a job.
This one is just devastatingly wrong. The sources show, again and again, that a huge percentage of people experiencing homelessness are working.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Between 40 and 60%.
Yeah.
They have jobs. The problem isn't work ethic. It's that housing is completely unaffordable.
And the data on that is just impossible. There's literally no county, no state in the U.S. where someone working full-time at minimum wage can afford a simple one-bedroom apartment.
Think about the hours. To afford that one bedroom, you'd have to work about 86 hours a week.
That's 2 full-time jobs.
It's more than 2 full-time jobs, with almost no time left to sleep or live. It's completely unsustainable. And it's a recent problem, too.
How so?
Well, the sources point out that back in 1970, the U.S. had a surplus of about 300,000 affordable homes. A surplus.
And today...
Today it's flipped. For every 100 extremely low-income families looking for a place to rent, there are only 37 affordable homes available.
The math just doesn't work.
It can't. About 70% of the lowest wage households are spending over half their income just on rent. When you're in that position, you're one emergency away, a sick kid, a car problem, from losing everything.
Which leads right into the second big myth, that people are choosing to live outside.
Right.
The sources are clear. It usually starts with an economic shock. But the reason people stay unsheltered is because of, well, systemic barriers.
Exactly. Shelters are often full, for one. But even when there's a bed, the policies can be incredibly strict.
What do you mean by strict? Give us a real-world picture of that.
Okay, so imagine you're an older couple who's been together for decades. Or maybe you're a young person and your only companion, your only source of safety is your dog.
Right.
A shelter might have a no couples policy or a strict no pets rule. So what's your choice? Give up the only family or protection you have for a bed. For many, the street feels like the only option that keeps their support system intact. The policies actually push people away.
And the result of that is just heartbreaking. People, especially, LGBTQI plus folks, are forced into these incredibly dangerous situations, facing violence, disease.
And then you have these laws, these out of sight, out of mind ordinances that make it illegal to sit or sleep in public.
Which just criminalizes the problem.
It's completely counterproductive. It creates this revolving door between the street and the local jail, which then makes it even harder to get a job or housing later. It's a cycle.
This idea of structural failure, it brings us right to the critical drivers. The sources really stress that homelessness is often the last symptom of much bigger systemic issues.
Underfunded programs, inadequate safety nets, you name it. And intimate partner violence, or IPV, is a huge one. It's a major precursor, especially for low-income survivors.
And the data here is, it's really specific.
It is. This is where it gets really interesting. One study looked at survivors who had experienced violence right before becoming homeless. A full 40% of them said that violence was the direct reason they had to leave their home.
40%. So it's a direct cause and effect. And the sacrifices they make for safety, I mean, I was floored. 1 in 5 leaseholders who had a rental subsidy.
The very thing designed to keep them housed.
Right. They left that subsidy behind just to get away from the violence. They chose physical safety over guaranteed housing.
It just shows you the impossible choice they were facing. But here's the kicker. Despite fleeing violence, the vast majority of these survivors, 60%, ended up in unsheltered settings.
Wait a minute, 60%. If the cause was IPV, why aren't they in, specialized domestic violence shelters?
That's the system failing on multiple levels. First, capacity. DV shelters are almost always full. But second, it's logistics. A shelter might be on the other side of the city or even in another town.
So you'd have to leave your job, pull your kids out of school.
Exactly. You'd lose your entire community support system.
Oh.
So the data is stark. Only 5% of these survivors actually spent most of their nights in a DV shelter. The system just isn't there to catch them.
And that trauma just follows them, right? Because fleeing abuse can wreck your credit or leave you with an eviction, which becomes another barrier down the road.
It perpetuates the cycle. And of course, beyond these domestic drivers, you have massive global issues. War and conflict have displaced nearly 60 million people. And then you have failures in our own systems, like youth aging out of foster care with no money and no support.
It's a lot. And I want to shift now to focus on the group that the sources identify as the most vulnerable young children, specifically kids under 4.
Yes.
There was this huge study, over 20,000 caregivers, and it found that the timing and the duration of homelessness are just critical.
It's an incredible study because it gets so granular. It looks at when the trauma happened. Was it before the baby was born?
Yeah.
Oh, both.
Yeah.
And it found that children who experienced homelessness both prenatally and postnatally had the highest risk of all.
What kind of risks are we talking about?
Compared to kids who were never homeless, they had a 41% higher chance of being hospitalized after that first month of life, and almost a 50% higher odds of developmental delays.
Wow. And what about the duration? How long a child is homeless for?
That's where the numbers get really sharp, especially for infants under a year old. If they were homeless for more than 6 months, their health outcomes plummeted. The study found an adjusted odds ratio of 3.13.
Okay, for those of us who aren't data scientists, what does an adjusted odds ratio of 3.13 actually mean in plain English?
In plain English, it means that after you control for everything else, poverty, the mom's education, all of it, the single factor of being homeless for 6 months or more, that alone triples the likelihood that an infant will be in fair or poor health.
So it's a direct, measurable harm from the instability itself.
Precisely. It implies there is literally no safe amount of time for a child to experience this. The sources call it toxic stress, and it actually disrupts the architecture of a developing brain.
Which raises a huge question for policy then. Interventions have to be about getting families into housing as fast as humanly possible.
Immediately, to minimize that exposure.
Absolutely. Okay, so if the damage is this profound, we have to talk about policy. Let's look at the two competing ideas that come up in the VA's programs for veterans. We're talking about treatment first versus housing first.
The difference is really a philosophical one. Treatment first offers short-term housing, but it's conditional. It's tied to mandatory treatment for, say, substance use. You have to follow the rules to keep the housing.
On housing first.
That's the HUD VSH model. It offers permanent subsidized housing immediately. And this is the critical part. It's unconditional. There are no preconditions, no mandatory sobriety. You get the keys. The priority is stability.
So what does the evidence say? Which one works better?
Well, there was a massive analysis, nearly 300,000 veterans with mental illness. The results were incredibly clear. Enrollment in a Housing First program reduces your 3-year mortality risk by 4.6 percentage points.
A 4.6 percentage point drop in mortality just from providing a home. That is a massive health success.
It's huge.
And the other model, the conditional one.
In stark contrast, the study found that transitional housing, the treatment first model, had no measurable long-term effects on health or mortality. None.
So it just doesn't work long-term.
And worse, the analysis showed it often just delays people from getting into the Housing First program that actually does work.
Let's talk about the cost, though, because the assumption is that just giving people housing has to be incredibly expensive.
That's what's so fascinating. The evidence shows Housing First is actually cost-saving.
Ow!
It's a substitution effect. When you give someone a stable home, they stop using incredibly expensive institutional care. You're basically substituting the cost of rent for the much higher cost of repeat ER visits, long inpatient hospital stays, psychiatric holds, all the things that happen when someone is in crisis on the street.
So the stability of the home prevents the most expensive crises from happening in the first place.
Exactly. The money you save on healthcare and the justice system more than pays for the housing subsidy. You solve a housing problem with housing, and you save money doing it.
So to bring this all together for you, the listener, what we've seen from your sources is this clear picture of systemic failure, but also proven solutions.
Yeah.
The affordability crisis starts it, IPV can make it impossible to escape, and these old conditional models of aid just keep the cycle going.
And if we connect that to the big picture, the sources suggest the whole conversation needs to shift. We've shown it's a policy problem, not a personal one.
The debate is so often framed around rooflessness, just not having a physical place to live. But the research suggests that home is so much more than that. It's a base for safety, for relationships, for your identity.
And when you look at those devastating findings on child development or what survivors of violence go through, it's clear that what's lost isn't just a roof. It's that secure base. It's safety. It's a sense of self.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to consider. Should policymakers stop defining homelessness as just a lack of shelter and start defining it as the absence of home? As the loss of belonging and identity, it really reframes the whole problem to match the true scale of the trauma